usually comes on after okay, there we go. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to call this study session to order so we can get started. My understanding is that Mr. Peterson will be here soon, and I'm sure Mrs. Sears will also be here soon. She usually is. We can count on that. She will be here. So with that, I'm going to turn the time over to Dr. Lesser to begin our study session.
All right, President Minor, thank you very much, and good afternoon to all of you in our audience. I think just for the basis of time, I am going to toss this to Holly Williams, who can get us moving on the conversation of assessing our buildings and all of the data that will be presented today. So Holly, if you can take it away, that'd be great.
Great, thank you. President Minor, members of the board, thank you for having us tonight. This is the day we've been waiting for. So as we culminate the work that we've been doing over this school year so far, and actually last spring, to bring you the report tonight is exciting, and the next step in our process of developing the Mesa Public Schools Master Facility Plan. So tonight I'd like to introduce our partners who will be doing the bulk of the speaking to you, because they'll be sharing the data that they found, the results of the assessments that they've conducted, and then making some recommendations to us. I just want to remind you that after tonight is when the fun work for Mesa Public Schools begins, because we take their recommendations and their findings and we create our plan. So there'll be lots of discussions moving forward about how do we take all of this data that we now have and develop a very comprehensive and transparent plan to spend the bond dollars that have been trusted to us by our community. So very exciting times. They've got some great information to share. I would encourage you to question them throughout. They're ready for any questions as we go. And I would like to introduce our partners. First, I have Carl Tickle from Alpha Facility Solutions. He's joining us. He was on the facility assessment side. And then we have Ed Humble and Bill Carnes from MGT Consulting Group. They did our educational suitability that you've heard me talk about. So all three of them will be presenting tonight. And I would be remiss if I didn't also point a finger towards Linda Dorsch, my assistant, who has been integral in gathering the data and sharing it with our partners to make sure that they have everything they need to do. Also, our operations department, who have done an amazing job of making sure that these teams had the information, the data, the access to our buildings as they needed them. On the roofs in June to make sure they could assess our roofs. Great work. Frank Hunter was instrumental in making sure that work got done. So I wanted to say at the front how much I appreciate them. So I'm going to turn the time over to Carl to get us started. And if you have any questions, let us know, okay?
President Minor and Board, Carl Tickle here with Alpha Facility Solutions, as Holly said. About a year ago, I think it was, I was in one of the rooms where we were doing an interview with, I think there was a member of the board there and a lot of the school representative officials. And I remember one of the questions that was asked at the time is that our proposal looked well structured, looked like we knew what we were doing, but they wanted to know if we were going to be flexible. So I hope we were when we did this. Holly and Scott and Linda have just been tremendous, plus all the people we have worked with at all of the campuses. So I just wanted to thank you for that. So Alpha Facility Solutions is the prime on this contract. MGT of America and Dude Solutions, DSI, we've done work on lots of different places. We came together to hopefully provide you with a great solution. I think there's a lot of great information to get you started to develop your master plan. So I just wanted to introduce that, and I want to turn it over to get right into the meat of it, because there's a lot to discuss, to Bill Carnes. Thank you.
Okay, are we ready for the PowerPoint? There we go. All right. So I'm going to take you to this agenda. Let me cover the agenda with you real quickly to give you an idea about all that's coming at you during this cram-packed session. We're going to talk about the master planning process and components and community engagement. That will be my responsibility. We're going to bring Ed Humble back up to talk about capacity, utilization, and then he's going to help you understand the educational suitability and technology readiness. Carl will be coming back then to share with you the results of the physical conditions, and you'll see lots and lots of data coming at you. Then we'll bring Ed back to get down to the meat of the matter, which is the master planning process and the options and the recommendations. So that's a lot to cover in a relatively short period of time. So forgive us if we find ourselves talking rather quickly to try to get through this agenda. We have miles to go before we sleep. So we've used this metaphor often because it works so well. When you talk about facility planning, you've got to think about it as a puzzle. There are components to that puzzle. It's really important when you talk about facilities to make sure it's founded in the educational goals, and you can see the things that are underneath the educational goals. You cannot build a successful plan unless you listen to the voice of the people. And boy, did we listen to the voice of the people. I'll be sharing those results with you before I turn the microphone over. We need to do facility analysis. You've got to base your plan on good data that you can trust. And we're going to be sharing that data with you tonight. And then to come up with the comprehensive facility plan. I think probably the most important of those three items is the last one that talks about the master plan strategies. Ed has always paid a lot of attention to the S to that, because he will often say to you, and he'll probably say this again tonight, there are multiple ways to come at this thing. It's important that we help you understand what are those multiple ways. So it's a puzzle, and when it comes together, it creates a synergy. Can you do one piece of that puzzle? The answer is probably, but it's not going to be a very good plan. Put all four together, you'll get more than what you bargained for. It's a good synergy. Let's talk about the master plan foundation. It's really important that we build this plan upon this foundation. It needs to be based upon your overall strategic plan. What good is a facility plan going to do you unless it fits in the direction in which you would like to take this school district? In this community, the portrait of the graduate, that's a big deal. Because as we talk with the people, and I'll be sharing that again a little bit later, the portrait of the graduate, knowledge, skills, and dispositions that you've identified are really important to this community. And they shouted that back to us in many ways. So you've got to also have a plan that is incredibly data-driven. You've got the information that you need, but if we don't give that to you in a usable, easy to understand, defensible format, it will not be as successful. It's got to be a data-driven plan. There are facility implications as a result of all of that, and it's important that we really understand that. Soon, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to be seeing lots of charts, and those charts are going to contain colors. One of the colors on that chart is red. Let me tell you that if you see a lot of red, you know that you are facing significant challenges with your facilities. Spoiler alert, you are not a red school district, and what that means now is that all of the hard work and effort that you put into that, it shows. Now, where Ed and I and Carl travel often is we work with a lot of school districts that are seeing a lot of red. They've got a much taller mountain to climb than what you do. That's not saying that you don't have significant challenges, you do, but you are not a red school district, and we want to compliment you for all of that previous hard work. There are numerous school districts in America that don't have that opportunity. So this is a commentary, I think, on all the hard work and commitment that you have made towards your facilities, because that commitment shows. Let me go to the next slide. Let's talk about community engagement. Rule that we've learned is don't ask the people of Mesa to give you their opinion unless you're willing to listen. Boy, did they have a lot to tell us during these sessions. The process worked well for us. We started with the clickers, the large group. I think many of you saw how that worked. And we always say that's the conversation starter. And we got the conversation started when we went into the small groups. So what did we learn over that six episode event where we went to the various high schools to listen to the voice of the people? First of all, we heard in those opportunities that safety and security is a big concern for your community. That should not surprise you. It's sad, isn't it, that we even have to have that on every one of our charts, but that's a big concern for these people. Diversity and equity. There are two parts to the diversity and equity. First of all, there's a lot of celebration about the fact that we are a diverse school district, and we're very proud of that. They're also proud of the efforts that have been made towards equity, with the realization is that we are not there yet, but we are heading in the right direction. We are making progress, and they wanted to celebrate that with you. Not only what you have done in the past is that if you make a promise to them, keep your promise and show us that you have kept that promise. That word is called transparency. They want financial transparency. They appreciate how you've done it in the past. They would like to see you to continue to do that as a major part of your facility plan. And of course, we come back to the portrait of a graduate standards, because those are standards that we don't see everywhere in American schools. We still see us measuring that one box of knowledge and saying, now that's what we want our graduates to look like. And your people are saying, no, it isn't. That's not going to cause them to be successful as we go forward. But that's going to require us to take a look at flexible learning environments, because we can't have a 1960s environment and talk about a flexible learning environment all in the same sentence. We've got to find a way to discover what that flexibility looks like in your buildings. The capacity of the buildings. Ed's going to talk to you a lot about capacity. Dr. Humble has been teaching this subject at college for a number of years. He understands capacity. He wants to share that with you tonight. What about the capacity of your schools do you need to know as part of your data? And then finally, we come down to the building conditions and the building suitability. And he'll help you understand what that's all about, so I'll save that for later on. The next slide, I know I'm going quickly, and I hope you will accept my apology. What did we hear in terms of the crucial elements for the Mesa Public Schools Facility Master Plan? We heard loudly and clearly that you have to have as your foundation modern classrooms that are based on the portrait of a graduate standards. We understand that that you need to have program equity, not program equality. Let's make sure that we're operating with the same definition for those two words. Equity is defined as the equal distribution of resources. You don't need that. What you need is equity, which is the fair distribution of resources. Someone once said there's nothing more unequal in this world than the equal distribution of resources, and I think that's probably true. We need to talk about with you the condition of the facilities and help you understand that going forward, what's driving that plan and why is it in the plan based upon the data that you've received. Obviously, we've got to have the capacity in there as well. And then finally, the financial considerations and the transparencies. So ladies and gentlemen, with your permission, I'd like to bring up Dr. Humble. Okay, and hand that over to him.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it. Thank you for having us here tonight. I'm excited about being here. We've been working for a year now in the Mesa district and gotten to know you and your staff and your community very well, and it's just been really fun. And I'm happy to be able to get this to you. As Bill said, I really agree with that whole concept of this is a puzzle, and then we get all these pieces of the puzzle, and until they're all put together, you don't see the whole picture. And so, and if you try to build a plan with holes in the picture, it's really difficult to do. So with that, I get now into some of the detail on this. And I'm going to start with what we call the capacity and utilization of a school. And Bill was teasing me about it because I do teach a college course on school facility planning, and the students usually after about the third straight session of talking about, they say, we're not going to talk capacity again, are we? And I say, yeah, we are. Because it's really difficult to understand. People think that capacity is just a hard number, that we just built a new elementary school that has a capacity of 750 kids because the architect told me that, and that's how many kids I can put in there. Okay? And I'm here to say that capacity is not a hard number. It's a decision you make every day. And I can give just some simple examples. The easiest example I can get is take that 750 student elementary school and let me be I used to be an elementary principal at one time in my career. Let me be the principal of that school, and I go to that third grade room and I change it to a special ed room. I just changed the capacity of this building because you're not going to put as many kids in a special ed room as you're going to put in a third grade room. So it's decision decisions that you make, and it has to be based on the program you want to have. That's challenging because we're working toward that program. We want our schools to meet all of the goals of Portrait of a Graduate. That's challenging to do. So we spent a lot of time early on in this process going through what is that program. And then what this is not Mesa information. And this is just to give you an example. Here's how, the simple, quick way, giving you 3 nights of class in one slide here. This is the quick, simple way. I knew you'd appreciate that. Of understanding how capacity is calculated. Well, we got different categories, and this is just some examples. And the categories can get very, very lengthy. Okay, we have some different examples. How many in my sample school here? General classrooms grades 9 through 12. I got to read that from here. There's 34 students per classroom. Excuse me. There's number of classrooms in this building. There's 34 of them, and we're going to put 30 students per classroom in those categories. In the science room, we're going to put 28, and so on down the line. You see some down there that have zeros by them. Well, that's because a resource room wouldn't have any capacity, because when the students leave the room they're assigned to go for some resource assistance, you don't then infill that seat back in their other classroom. It's just not the way it works. Elementary people often talk about, we got an elementary music room that I can put 30 kids in there. Yes, you can. But if you structure your programs like almost every elementary school in America, Mrs. Brown's 3rd graders leave their room and they go to the music room. You don't put another 30 kids back in Mrs. Brown's room. So you didn't add 1 student of capacity. So that's why capacity becomes a complex thing. And so we have to know what that is, because if we're going to make good decisions, we got to say, how many students can we fit in this? That's the example of how this gets put together. And you see down there, there's that, what we call the scheduling factor. And this is a high school example because we put 75%. We really want to try to calculate that as best we possibly can, because you can't. There's no if your principals are assigning every school at exactly the capacity number and everything works out exactly, they deserve accolades, because that's hard to do, and it's easier at elementary. It is still difficult than it is at junior high, than it is at high school. High school, just to start with, if you're a traditional schedule, and I know you've got all kinds of different schedules going on, but if you're a traditional schedule and you have a teacher teaches you have a 7-period classroom day, and a teacher teaches 6 of them, and that during their prep period they use their room. You just lowered your capacity by 17%, because you took away 17% of the use of that building by not using that room for each of those prep period times. I don't know if you do that in all of your schools, but those are the kinds of things that typically go on that make capacity a 3-class subject. And so here I'm going to show you capacity numbers for your school district. And this is the overall. I thought I'd be able to stand here and just look up there. All this gray hair I have in my eyes too are going the same way. So I'm going to look at it on here. But this district capacity here, you'll see the numbers on there, and this is just by your bands: elementary, junior high, high school, other, which includes all others. I understand fully you have K-8s, and I applaud you for having that option for people. This is just to give you an overview right now. In the report, you have the results of every single school and the grade level bands that are in that school. This is just to give you an overview of what to see in this report, okay? So your elementary, your actual number of elementary students was 31,000, just over 31,000 students in 2019-20. We did projections out, and the projections are if everything stays the same. Now you're going to have opportunities to have everything not necessarily stay the same. So this isn't. So that's why this is a flexible document, because you're going to want to be able to go in and make some changes here and there and say, no, we're not going to allow that to happen, or we're going to make a change some other way. But you have projected, and so we ran this on projections of just over 30,000. When I add up all the capacity of every elementary school in the Mesa School District, you have over 40,000 students worth of capacity. So that means you have excess space. Right now you're at 80%. Remember Bill's red, green, blue, yellow things? It's the darkest green is the best place to be, and the red is the worst place to be, and all of that legend is in the report for you to see. Okay, you're projected to be at 78. That gets into the yellow category. Not bad, but it's 80% is up. Anything from 80 to about 100, we say that's in pretty good because you got some flexibility in your buildings, and you're doing pretty well with that. So that gets in the green. Okay, I really need to point out we calculated all of these capacities without counting your portables. And you have a lot of portables in this district, okay? And without. And the reason for that is that we really believe you want to build a master plan that houses all students in permanent facilities. And so this is calculated without that. We have the number of portables, so if you want to say, I want to look at this with that, all of that data is been done and it's available to you, okay? You see on there that you've got some excess capacity at the elementary level. We're gonna get to that. Your junior high, even more so. You have more capacity at junior highs. That's not going to surprise anybody here. You moved the ninth graders into the high schools just recently. Did that for some good reasons, program reasons. The most important piece of the puzzle is this is program based. That's what this is about. A master plan's more about education than it is facilities. So that was a good reason for doing that, but it created excess space at your junior highs. Your high schools, on the other hand, when you add up everything, you're a little bit over. It's still not, it's only in the yellow. We don't get to red until it's 110%. And there is some red. Bill was right, you're not a red school district. There is some schools, individual schools that are in red, and we're gonna talk about how to deal with that. Overall, for the other schools, a little bit less. That's not unusual at all. And then there's your district total average for the district capacity and utilization. Now, the way I'm going to do this is because we don't just in time. You in your report that I think you've received, the full report, you've got what I'm going to show you on the next page for high schools. You have this for every school in the district, every kind of school. But just so that you understand what we're looking at, here's the I'm using as the theme through each of these now the high school capacity and utilization. So you can look right down the list. Dobson High School, there's the actual enrollment, there's the projected enrollment, and there's your capacity. Dobson has some excess capacity. You could put some more students in there. It's at 77% now. It's yellow. Remember I said if it's 110 or more, we say it's red. That's over capacity, and you need to deal with that. And how are you dealing with that? You're dealing with it all kinds of ways. You got a lot of portables. That's a key way you're doing it. You've probably got some classes going on in rooms that weren't planned for that. Okay, you got all of those things that were a book room and now they're a classroom, and all those things that happen in schools and school districts all over the country. You've got that going on because at Mesa High you're currently at 110 and projected to go to 113. You're overcrowded there. So the question for the master plan is, what do we do about that? We're gonna get to that. You can see where that works. As a total, you're at 105, projected to be 103. It's not green, but it's not red either. That's not terrible, because we always say if you're just barely over 100% capacity, let's look at the reason for that before we go out and spend a lot of money fixing this. Look at the reason. Is there a bubble of a grade level coming? What is let's dig underneath a little bit and know what that means, okay? So that's your capacity and utilization. I'm going now to another piece of this puzzle, as Bill was talking about. I'm going to go to educational suitability and technology infrastructure readiness. That's a big term. To explain what that is. When we went out and assessed your buildings, and I'm going to show you scores for all of your buildings, and the scores are going to be in green, yellow, orange, and red as well. I'm going to show you scores. What is educational suitability? Educational suitability moves, okay, and we program it into our system we use this system called BASIS to go out and assess the schools based on what we knew about your programs and what are you trying to do. And you're trying to get this flexibility and create spaces that will accommodate the goals of your portrait of a graduate, okay? So what it measures is how well does this facility support the program you want for schools. In other words, and again, I'll just give oversimplistic kinds of things, but if I go into a junior high and I look at a science room, please don't be offended by this because I'm just giving examples from all over the country. Is it really a science room that is planned for science and has lab tables and has all of the correct things? Or is it just a classroom that the door says science on the front of it, okay? And everybody has some of both of those. So don't, that's just the way it is. But if it is just a classroom, it's scored lower. And what that then means, what that ends up being in the report is, you need some science rooms at this facility if you're going to be able to house the programs and support the programs you want, okay? Technology infrastructure readiness, that long term there. It's really important that you understand that that is the ability, the infrastructure of the facility to support the technology we want for our kids, for our teachers, for our communities, okay? It is not a measure when you see, because you're going to see some scores and you'll see a few reds here and there, and it's not, do you have enough equipment? I applaud this district for the efforts you've put in on technology, okay? This is, can the facilities support that technology? It's a very different thing than do you have enough equipment, and I want you to keep that in mind, okay? So that's the things that are measured in that, okay? Let's look at the average scores across the district again on the same categories. Your average score of educational suitability for your elementary schools was 66, okay? You had at least one elementary school that scored as low as 52. That's one of Bill's red schools, okay? And the highest you had was 78. Remember, you got to be over 80 to get into the greens on here. The other way I like to do this, I'm an old teacher and principal and superintendent myself, and so it's kind of 90 to 100's an A, and 80 to 90 is a B, and so on, okay? Well, your average is 66, and so on. You've there, and that's to be expected, because Carl's going to come up and tell you what good condition. Sorry to take it away, Carl, but what good condition your schools are in, because you've really kept them up, and you've done that. But you're looking at portrait of a graduate standards, and you want your schools to support that, and we measured against that. So your average is 66. Again, that we find that's not that bad for what we find all over the country. Your junior highs, you can see the range, 68, 83, an average of 75. Your high schools, kind of the same, not quite as high, and your other schools had the lowest in that category. Not unusual, because there's usually real specialized programs going on in some of those other school categories, and an average of 64. This plan needs to address educational suitability needs. Are our schools really equipped to support the program we want? Okay? All right. Infrastructure, technology readiness. Let's take a look at what that is for the district, okay? Same kind of categories, same scoring system. You have at least one elementary school that scored as low as 40. That school, it is a facility that's probably very, very aged. Does not have it's probably got a couple of plug-ins on each end of every classroom and those kinds of things that caused it, that it's not supporting what you want to do. Again, it's not the programs you have, it's not the equipment you have, is the building supporting that, okay? On the other hand, you have an elementary school that scored 93. It's almost impossible to get 100 on this. We're tough graders, and so it's almost impossible to get 100. If you're in that dark green, that means you're up in the 90s, and that's like an as-new condition. Junior highs, 61 to 92. Your averages were in the 70s all the way across, okay? So there are some infrastructure things as you make decisions about improving school facilities that you'll need to look at, okay? And with that, I'm going to be back up when it comes to the how to put all this together in the end, but Carl's going to come up and talk about the next piece of the puzzle, which is the physical condition of the buildings.
Thank you. So the facility condition assessment versus a suitability assessment is we go in and we look at all the building systems. We look at the roofs, we look at the heating and air conditioning, and we looked at over 900 buildings in your district. Pretty good sized district. That's a lot. 8+ million square feet. So we walked every one of those, took information from all of the facilities, and built a database supporting all that. And that database is a live database. You will have that afterwards. That's part of the ongoing. You purchased the Dude Solution software to do the capital forecasting and the work order asset management. And so that information lies within your software for your people to continue to use. And both Ed and I and our teams will continue to help Holly and Scott and them as we go forward on how to use that best and how to pull the information out, because the data is enormous amount. So we gathered equipment assets, like we gathered nomenclature data off of boilerplate information, like the boilers. It says it's X type, it's X size, it was built and installed in X year, and all of that will be in your system. We used all of that to help create the facility condition indexes for every one of the schools, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So our goals here on the right-hand side, it says we assess the current and future out years projected condition. So you have a baseline with which to plan from. We populated the Dude Solutions capital planning and work order software, which you all bought as part of this, that Scott and his teams will be using, and Holly and her team will be using. And then there's a district executive summary that you all got as part of your read-aheads if you had a chance. It's pretty voluminous with all the breakouts of the individual groupings of schools. There are individual reports on every campus with much more detail breakout that's available to them too. And there's one report that we put in for your read ahead on Sousa that you could look at and see what the standard report looks like. But the information that comes from is all in your database systems now, so you can continue to use that and continue to update it as an ongoing thing. And so the data that we gathered, the facility condition index, is what Ed and Bill have been talking about, gets folded in as part of the master planning. Before I go any further, we've been firing stuff at you. Do you have any questions? Give you a chance for... Okay.
On my mind. You've been talking about the data that's accessible and the software that all of this has. How realistic, or how is it flexible is it, so that as our district changes and the people who work in the district change, is it easy to transfer that information to other people? Is it something where a new group of people or a new set of eyes come on it and they have a difficult time managing that information? You guys have gone through a lot to get that information. I just want to make sure how accessible that is for the future.
That's a good question. So, and it's an important one for you all, obviously. So, the setup of the information you don't ever have to do, but the basis of that, Scott and Holly and their folks have been involved in. There's going to be some robust training for all the individuals. Now that all the data is in there, they can look at it and really identify what it is. And then the Dude Solutions and us, and Dude Solutions likes to say that they offer, lifetime training. And so that's available, and as the software changes and gets updated, you can get help with that too. But the idea of people are trained in using it from the start, and then as the incremental changes of people or the processes that you have change, you can get some more training for it and help to do that. I think for the most part, I hesitate to say this, but I'm a good user of it. So I think it's fairly easy to use, and once the people have the basics, that the next person coming in, they're going to train their successor or a new person, I think it'll be relatively easy to do once they have the basic understanding of what it's supposed to do, because it contains a lot of information. Mm-hmm. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Did I do this, or?
You skipped FCI.
Oh, yeah, okay. So I wanted to do just a quick tutorial, if you will, on what facility condition index is. and how we use that. It's a standard across the industry scoring methodology where you take it and identify all of the needs of the facility. Let's say there's a roof that needs to be repaired and it's worth $1 million. You add up the roof, you add up the doors, you add up the windows, and you come up with a set of, like up there it says $6 million would be a total need. And if your building is valued at $30 million, 6 divided by 30 times 100 gives you an FCI of 20. What that allows you is to take every facility, those 900 buildings I was talking about, and all the 87 campuses? 85 campuses, and you can compare them to each other. And you can rack and stack them from an overall facility condition index, and you can rack and stack them from worst to first for roofs or doors or plumbing or whatever. So that's all available to do that. But this helps you get started with an FCI of thinking how you would prioritize. You already have some information, some hard data to prioritize. The last bullet there talks about the systems evaluated. That's in general. We evaluated every major system of the building and put all of that information into the database to be able to feed the master planning portion of it. And in your read-aheads, the Sousa report, I pulled this out as an FCI example. It shows you there were, 8 different buildings that were on that campus. Each one of them were evaluated separately and then added up to give an overall total. So there's a total needs, if you see the 4th column there, for each school. There's a current replacement value for each school. And it gives you a total there, and it gives you an FCI, Facility Condition Index, for today and for 5 years out in the future for planning purposes. So that's the basis, the foundation for all the data and for your initial thinking of your planning.
And I'm assuming underneath of that you could drill down to see which specific component needs to be serviced.
Absolutely.
Within the system.
It'll tell you which one of those and what year that you expect it to expire, or if it's already old and expired.
Did you ever come across a building that it was worth less than the repairs that you have to make to the building? Did you run across that in our district?
No,
at
we
all?
didn't, because as the others said before me, is that you have a pretty decent set of facilities already. You know, you've found ways, you have the staff, you found some money to keep them all going at a pretty good condition. So we didn't find anything that was surprising. If it was surprising, it was probably that we found districts where, you know, of this size, where there's a couple $2 billion worth of requirements right today, whereas that didn't happen here. There's a lot of requirements, and will continue to be so, but we didn't find that condition. Mm-hmm.
If I'm understanding correctly from what I saw, ours was, right now, it's about a little over 200 million is what I saw for our district.
Yeah.
To bring her up to speed.
Mm-hmm. The current deferred and renewal requirements that you have. Yes, sir. Ed, back over to you.
Thank you, Carl.
Mm-hmm.
So now we've given a, hope I didn't do that.
We're going to have a facilities failure in the
Great
middle.
timing.
Facilities.
You know, we're the facilities people, and here we go. Okay. So we've given you just a quick overview of the different pieces of the puzzle. Okay. And now I want to bring it together into the components of a master plan. And so the first concept I want to introduce to you is what we call a combined score. Now, each of these scores, you know, the suitability score, the technology score, the physical condition score, those all have, each one of those have a mountain of data behind it that you can go look at. You can say, why did this one get a suitability score of this? And you can go through that whole report and, well, yeah, the playground does need this. And yeah, that music room is really pretty. But you can go through and see why, okay? The combined score is more of a subjective thing, but we find that districts really need it in order to prioritize overall need, okay? Because I like to say, you know, I've been doing this for a long time. I've got gray hair. I've been doing this for a lot of years, okay? And I keep looking for the school district that when we get all done with this, we end up with more money than needs. I haven't found it yet. I'm not going to find it in Mesa, and so therefore you have to prioritize, because you're not going to be able to do everything, because you're going to have more needs than you have resources to deal with those needs, so you have to prioritize. The combined score is a good method to do that, okay? What we did here, through a lot of discussion with your staff, okay, we take and we apply a percentage to each of the component scores: the suitability, the physical condition, and the technology readiness. And you'll see across the top of this page, you'll see a little 60, 35, 5. And that's because, and there's no magic about this. You can adjust that. You know, this is a document you can, okay, but we put 60% weight to suitability. We put 35% weight to the physical condition and 5% weight to the technology readiness. We did it that we ended up there, and again, there's no magic or that has to be that. We ended up there saying, number one, this is built on standards of portrait of a graduate. This is built on meeting the educational program needs of facilities. So we put the highest weight on the suitability score. We did lower and sometimes we do that like 55 and 40 and those kind of things. We lowered the physical condition to a 35 because you've done a good job keeping your schools up. Does that mean that you don't have any, you got $200 million worth of things to do, okay? But in a district your size, relatively speaking across the country, I don't never want to say $200 million is a low number, but relatively speaking, it's lower than we normally see in a district your size, okay? And that, you should be proud of that fact. And so, therefore, we lowered the percentage weight given to that. We usually put a pretty low weight on the technology readiness because it costs less to make those improvements. It really does. And a lot of it will happen when you make the other kinds of improvements. You'll build that into it. So we put a lower score, okay? So we ended up, here's the range for your elementary schools based on that criteria. Have a low of 65, a high 84, the average 73. All of your different categories of schools fell within the 70s, so they're in that yellow category. But you've got schools that are doing very well. In that, when you look at that range, at every level, you've got schools that are in the 80s. That's really very good when you put that all together. You don't have any of them that fell down in their combined score into the red. That's where Bill was saying early on, you're not a red district, okay? The next page I'm going to go very quick on. Is this really the same thing, but the first one showed you the ranges and the average. This shows what across those different categories, what each of the component scores were. And if you wanted to do the math and apply 60%, 35%, 5%, then you'll end up with what's in that last combined score ones. This gives you how it got to that, and you'll see that for every school. And now I'm going to do it. I'm going to show you that for sticking with, because I did this because I could fit all the high schools on one page, and so I do is show you the high schools. Yes, sir. Yeah. Thank you for that, because I'm gonna explain what that is here. Okay, this puts for your high schools. This puts all the scores. The suitability score tells us what the grade configuration is, of course, what the suitability score, the condition score, the technology score, and then what that equals for a combined score. We put that energy column out to the side because it's not a factor in creating that combined score that came first. But it is a factor that should be considered. And this was done, it was done by a different contractor that the district used to do an energy efficiency assessment of each building, and we just put it in categories of yellow, green, and red, depending on where it scored. So that's what that means. And it's not, it wasn't part of what our contract was, but we were impressed by it and thought that you needed to put it here and see it, because it's a factor that should be taken into consideration when you determine which schools are going to be improved, which schools are going to be combined with all these different options that you have. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's what that means. All right, so that's the combined score component. Now we really get kind of into the fun stuff now, okay? And once again, this is going to be your plan. We're recommending some master plan drivers. As you go into developing this master plan, you need to determine the drivers. It's like having your standards ahead of time before you just start going, well, we did this because we thought that'd be good, and that, that kind of a thing. But having the drivers for them, it doesn't matter, because there's going to be lots of options that you're going to be able to look at. But no matter which option you end up with, it should meet what you determine are your master plan drivers, okay? Our recommendation from our spending a year in your school districts and talking to your people is that first and foremost, it needs to align with the district strategic plan. This is an educational program facility master plan. That's what it's based on, as Bill presented. That's the foundation of this. It needs to do that, okay? It needs to provide for equity of program opportunities. That's what we are trying to get at in this district. That's what the goals are that came out, okay? Down to the nuts and bolts part, we said address the schools with the highest condition need. And we're recommending defining that as a combined score of less than 70. Address those schools first, because you've got a number of them that are less than 70. Those are the ones, let's deal with those, because those really aren't meeting the needs of the kids, especially in the educational suitability. We went on to another step and said, because some of your condition scores are very, very high, okay, that it skewed that number up. So any place where there's a suitability score of less than 65, that's a red. That meant it's a red school if it's in the 60s, okay? That should also be one of the priorities for addressing, even if its condition caused it to have a combined score over 70. Does that make sense? Most of the schools are going to be the same. I'm going to show you the schools that are in this. I'm sorry, I didn't even move to this page, did I? No, I'm on the right one. Okay. Most of the schools are going to be the same, but there are some that fall in that category of in between, and we thought that was okay. You need to address your utilization inconsistencies, okay? Remember, you got utilization from one school is a low of 15% to one school is a high of 168% or something like that. You need to address those inconsistencies. It's not easy to do, but you need to do that, okay? And clearly, your master plan needs to maintain fiscal responsibility and transparency with your communities, okay? That's our recommendation. There's nothing magic about this. You're going to want to give that some thought and say, are there some other things that we want to have as a driver? Are there things that these gentlemen put on there that shouldn't be on there? That's what you want to take a look at, okay? The next one then is that I'm going to go through components of a master plan, and the first one is how do we deal with program improvements, and how does that affect which schools get addressed and what kinds of things we need to do, okay? So we think that you do need to do program improvements at all levels, and that's identified in the educational suitability score of schools. That's why we added that 65 score in there, okay? You need to do that, and so you need to make improvements as you go through the development of this master plan and make improvements to schools that they are geared toward making those program improvements, okay? We think you need to have some real discussion about facility improvements to attract parents and students to choose public schools. Because you've got space, you've got the students out there. School districts all over the country are facing the same things. Charter schools are a real thing, and they're important. And what kinds of things can we do to make public schools the school of choice for the people in our school district? And we think that's an important component to put into that, okay? And then address the identified deficiencies that you're going to see as you read through the report, and get into even the appendices to the report which show the actual scores, okay? All right, so the first thing is, how do we address this whole capacity and utilization thing? And I know I get teased about I put this one first all the time, but how do we address this? And it's because you have this wide range. At the elementary level, you have one school that is projected to be at 15%. I don't think that's going to happen, but it's right now only at like 48, I think it's at 48% right now, okay? So there's a lot of excess space in that particular school. So we're heating and cooling and all that stuff and paying for that we're really not using, so let's address that. On the other hand, you've got, even though you got enough capacity at the elementary level, you got one school that's projected to be at 168%, and it's right now at like 140-some%, not even the projected. So it's an issue you have right now. You can see those ranges for the junior high. You can see those ranges for the high school and for the other schools. I think it's important to look at the total number. You have 54 elementary schools. When I said it needs to address the range of utilization, you have 21 of those that are currently at less than 70% utilized. That you got 30% excess space in those buildings. 8 of them are currently over 110. So how do we address that? And we're going to give you some suggestions here in just a minute. At the junior high, you've got 9 schools. You got 2 that are under and none that are over. At the high school, you have 6 and there's none that are under and 4 that are over. So how do we address that issue? And I'm going to get to that right now in just a minute here. And you can see the categories on the other, okay? So I'm going to walk through these, the capacity utilization options you have and the recommendations that we would say that you should move forward with, okay? The issue at the high school level is that the overall is that when you just look, if you looked at that one for the total, for the overall for the district, it's at a reasonable percentage. I think it was 102 or 103 right in that area, okay? But it varies widely among the schools. 4 schools are projected over 110 and 1 is projected less than 75. All right, so what are the options? What are the ways? Yes, Scott?
Time.
Todd? Ah, okay. He was trying to be subtle, and I needed to be hit in the head. Okay, you can deal with that through making boundary adjustments. That doesn't work for you because you'd have you got one school that you'd have to move every kid to. What a domino effect going on. What a headache. That doesn't work for you. You can do it through additions, okay? We are really going to stress you need to have some discussion in the Mesa school districts about school size. Because, yeah, you could take care of all that with it. You have 2 high schools now at 35 that are projected to be over 3,500 students. How big is too big? And so you need to do that. And I know I'm taking way too much time, but there are a lot of, I can find you a study that says the best size high school is 3,500. I can find you a study that says the best size high school is 300. So you need to find the best size high school for Mesa, and that has to do with your programs. But how many is too many? A combination of that is a good idea. A 7th high school, if you did a 7th high school, you'd have an average enrollment of 2682, and you wouldn't have to go through all those other changes, okay? You could do grade level realignment, not practical, you just change that for program reasons, okay? You need to do facilities. Our recommended options there are determine your high school, your desired high school size, then do a combination of the boundary adjustments and additions based on what size you want high schools to do, okay? I don't want to throw out that 7th high school level, okay? I'm going to go to the junior high here in just a minute because that's where that comes back in. The junior high, the issue there is that Taylor is the only school you have that's within that desired range. It's 88%. All the others are less than 75, with one of them, Shepherd, is less than 60, okay? One junior high option is that you develop a district-wide feeder school of 7 high schools and 7 junior highs. You could do that. You could even maybe convert, we have some ideas where maybe convert one of the junior highs. It's going to take a lot of work and a lot of money into a 7th high school and make that be a 7-7 plan and have those feeder patterns work. We think you could do that here. It would take some adjustments, okay? You could just simply at the junior highs reduce the number of schools, okay? At 7 schools, you currently have 9. At 7, theoretically, you're not overcrowded. Now, that would require a lot of boundary changes and a lot of headaches, but you could. You could do it through grade level realignment. We don't think that's a logical option for Mesa, and you are going to need to make some facility and program improvements, okay? Number 1 on our recommendations, determine the desired number of junior highs. Reduce the number, and whether you reduce that number by doing a 7-7 plan or whether you combine it with the high school plan or just reduce the number of junior highs, you need to do that, okay? Elementary for capacity, it's a little bit different there. You got a projected average of 78. That's not that bad, but you need to address that wide range. Remember that 15% to 168, okay? You can do it through boundary adjustments. That's going to be a real headache, okay? We think program enhancements. We think attract parents to send their children to the Mesa public schools, make facility improvements based on those plans, okay? That is our recommended. Again, determine your size and then do a combined approach. And that combined approach is probably going to be replace some schools. And it's probably going to be take these 2 schools and replace it with 1. And those kinds of things so that you have facilities that really meet the program needs of the district, okay? I know, I'm trying, Scott, I'm trying. The next two just tell you, these are just, what are those schools that had a combined score of less than 70, okay? With the exception of 2 in the other category, all of them were elementary schools, okay? The next page, just so you know, those are the ones that you need to address. Those need to be priority facilities. The next one is the suitability less than 65. There's a few more in the elementary category, still none at the junior high and high school. So the issue at junior high and high school is the program needs for meeting the goals of the portrait of a graduate and the utilization needs, okay? Facility condition issues. You got to provide facilities that meet those long-term educational program goals. That means you're going to do renovations and new construction based on school size. As I was just saying, it could be single replacement of multiple facilities. Our recommendation is to renovate or replace those highest need facilities that we are on that list. Standardize your school size and get those, especially at the elementary level, at all levels, but especially the elementary, get the program enhancements that will address. And encourage people to make this the school district of choice, and thank you. 6:02. Now, we didn't start till 5 after, Scott.
You did great. You did great.
6:02.
Thanks, Ed.
Exactly right, you're right. We owe you 3 minutes.
You see, I had 3 minutes left, because I could talk.
Those are question time.
No.
Yeah.
Well, you could do one of those commercials of prescriptions where they have to tell really fast all the things
Yeah,
about the
yes.
prescriptions that are
Yeah.
deadly. And the advertisement, you could do that advertisement.
There you go.
Okay.
So thank you. We're here. We know your time is limited, but we're here to answer any questions. All 3 of us
So
are here to
many.
answer any questions that you have.
There's so many. Board, do you have any?
One thing that I would like to ask is, you talked about program enhancements at the elementary level,
Mm-hmm.
but we have to sustain those through the junior high and the high school.
Of course.
Couldn't we do program enhancements at the junior high schools and the high schools? And I didn't see that option. I just saw it for elementary.
Well, no, I put it, it's in there as that, on one of those pages, that whole program
Okay.
enhancement, it said at all levels you need to do that.
At all levels,
At
okay.
all levels you need to do that. I'm stressing the elementaries because I think that is the solution, rather than, you're at 78% overall across the district. You got to fix that you range from 15 to 168. So
Right.
that's going to require some difficult decisions, and one of the best decisions there is to attract more students.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
It does, thank you.
Okay.
Just my observation is it's much better than condition that I was afraid it was going to be in. So I was expressly concerned about the condition of our elementaries and what we might be facing trying to address those needs at the elementary. And this sounds more doable than I was afraid. So I'm excited to see better results than I expected.
It is very good to know that our buildings are being well taken care of and are in good overall condition. It does mean that we are going to have to dive even deeper into this data to really make informed decisions. So as Ed was pointing out, there's a lot of different factors, there's a lot of ways to attack this, and the overall condition of the facilities didn't really answer where to start. So now we're into, what are the educational programs? What are we trying to achieve? Remember, 168% over capacity. I think capacity is going to be a big conversation as we continue to go forward. I don't think any district that was 75,000 is now 65 or less can ignore that. And I don't think we're trying to, but we're trying to figure out where to start and how to start. So that's going to be, so when we're at 168%, remember we took portables off the table. So that doesn't mean the kids aren't in classrooms or they're 40 in a classroom. It just means that they're probably in a lot of portables on that campus. So, but it tells us there's enough brick and mortar for our kids, and that's a good news. We can get them into buildings and out of portables, but we're going to have to make a lot of decisions to get to that point.
So our next meeting talking about this will be kind of the timeline. What are you going to do next? What do we have to look forward to now that this huge heavy lift has been completed? I'm anxious to see.
Yes, so our plan moving forward would be exactly that, Mrs. Minor, that we would have lay out a plan for you of how we're going to attack this, the data that we will use for that. Our goal moving forward would be, as a couple meetings ago, you remember you approved some bond lists, or you were exposed to them, and we had individual projects. Our hope moving forward would be that we would identify schools. And we would say, in that school, these are the projects that are going to happen, as opposed to a list of HVAC projects and a list of office projects and a list. It would be a bigger, more robust plan to address. So if we go into one of our elementary schools, we would say, these are all the systems we're going to impact, because the master plan and the data that we have suggests that all those need to be addressed.
Kind of have a dream that as the state starts to, as they've promised to restore some of our capital funding that was mostly cut, that we could get to a point where we had a schedule and we didn't have to wait till something broke to fix it. That we could maintain our buildings without disrupting the educational flow, without hearing we have junior highs with not enough bathrooms operating, or, you know, that we would be able to be in a preventive mode instead of just always playing catch up. And I think this gives us a roadmap for how to eventually get there, given that the funds continue to improve and that we can make wise use of the money.
I think this is going to help us advocate for that. Ironically, the only bill to try to even address that this year only addresses condemned buildings can now be maybe torn down by the SFB if the bill makes it all the way through. But we haven't gotten to what are we going to do about the aging school facilities in Arizona, and that funding is going to have to, we're going to have to fight for it. So,
but I do think that our Dude Solutions software will help us with that, the capital forecasting part of it, so that now we have it all in one place that will pop up, that we know, okay, in 5 years, these HVAC systems are going to need to be addressed, so we can have a systematic plan for how we're going to replace it. And I agree, some sort of rotation or a very clear schedule of how that will happen would be the dream. Absolutely.
Another comment then would be is that I know personally it's very important to me, and I think to this board, that whatever data was gathered by this great team, that it was captured, hung on to, and then we could then utilize it going forward. And hence then the approval for the Dude Solutions. And so if there's resources or other things that are needed to continue to utilize and capitalize on this software, by all means bring those forward, because I think it's important to us as a board now to take this huge investment we put into it and to utilize it then to effectively make wise and good decisions, and for the first time since I've been on the board, to really have a good foundation from when we go out for bonds offerings in the future, to say, here's what we need to do, this is why should we analyzed it, whereas before it was really came down to what did we think the public would tolerate.
Yeah.
We put together a list and came up with an estimate, and I said, well, okay, we don't think they'll buy that, so we went with something we think we could support, versus really having some foundation. And even then we may have to cut it back to what the community can afford, but at least we have a much better foundation. And so I'm really excited about what has transpired in the efforts, and really appreciative.
Thank you for all your work, hard work, time-consuming work, all of you. Holly, congratulations, because it was a heavy lift. It was a lot of information that will be extremely valuable as we move forward, and we look forward to the next conversation. So with that, we need to move on. And again, thank you, gentlemen, for being here and sharing your information. It was good news, very good news. Do I hear a motion for adjournment to adjourn the study session?
We move that we adjourn the study session.
I'll say yay. Yay. Any nay?
Oh, yay.
I'm trying to change my lingo. All right.